At my daughter's wedding, I sat quietly in the back row watching her live her dream. The venue was spectacular, the kind of place that appeared in magazines with its crystal chandeliers and gardens that seemed to stretch forever. Everything was perfect until I heard her voice drifting through the reception hall. She was talking to her new mother-in-law, and the words cut through me like broken glass. "She is nothing, Mom. Just a burden I have been carrying my whole life. Thank God I can finally move on and live my real life without her dragging me down. Before we proceed, we want to appreciate you for watching Granny's narrative. Please subscribe and tell us where you are watching from in the comment. My name is Margaret Stone and I am 70 years old. Until that moment at the wedding, I believed my daughter Emily respected me. I believed the sacrifices I made raising her alone after her father died meant something to her. I was wrong about so many things. But what Emily did not know was that I had something her father left me before he passed. A recording. One final message that would change everything. Let me take you back to the beginning so you understand how I arrived at this moment. Emily had always been ambitious from the time she was a little girl. She wanted the finest things, the best schools, the right connections. When her father Thomas died suddenly of a heart attack when she was 15, she blamed me. Not directly, but I saw it in her eyes. She looked at our small house, my job as a seamstress, the modest life we lived, and she saw failure. Thomas had been an accountant at a prestigious firm, bringing home a comfortable salary. When he died, that income disappeared and I had to support us with my sewing business. Emily got into Princeton on scholarship and worked incredibly hard to fit in with students whose families had money that stretched back generations. She came home less and less during those years. When she did visit, she criticized everything. The worn furniture, the outdated appliances, the neighborhood that had become rougher over the years. She never said it outright, but I could feel her embarrassment. Her mother, the seamstress who worked from a spare bedroom taking in alterations and custom orders, was not the parent she wanted to introduce to her wealthy friends. After graduation, Emily landed a job at a high-end marketing firm in Manhattan. She moved into an apartment in a building with a doorman and started dating men whose names appeared in business journals. She was building the life she always wanted, and I was happy for her. Really, I was. Even when months would pass between her visits. Even when she started making excuses about why I could not come see her in the city. Too busy with work. Apartment too small. Maybe next month. Then she met Daniel Whitmore. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the East Coast. Old money. Real estate. The kind of wealth that does not announce itself because it does not need to. Daniel was handsome, educated, and completely devoted to Emily. When they got engaged after dating for 2 years, Emily called me with the news. Her voice was bright with triumph. "We are getting married at the Whitmore estate in Connecticut. It is going to be the wedding of the season." I should have known then that something was wrong. She did not ask me to help with planning. She did not want my input on the dress or the flowers or any of the details that mothers and daughters usually share. When I offered to make her wedding dress, to create something beautiful and unique that would show my love and skill, she declined. "Already ordered one from Vera Wang," she said. "But thank you anyway." The months leading up to the wedding were strange. Emily would call occasionally with updates, but the conversations felt rehearsed. She was telling me what she thought I wanted to hear while keeping me at a distance. I mentioned wanting to meet Daniel's parents, and she said they were traveling. Too busy. Maybe closer to the wedding. I wanted to throw her an engagement party, and she said her friends were already handling it. I wanted to be involved, and she wanted me invisible. Thomas would have seen through it. He was always better at reading people than I was. But Thomas had been gone for 17 years, and I had spent those years trying to be enough for Emily. Working long hours to pay for her college expenses that the scholarship did not cover. Attending every parent weekend I could afford. Supporting her dreams even when those dreams seemed to leave no room for me. 3 weeks before the wedding, a package arrived at my house. Inside was a recording device and a note in Thomas's handwriting. My hands shook as I read it. "Margaret, if you are reading this, it means Emily has done something that hurt you deeply. I recorded this message a week before I died because I saw things happening that worried me. Things about Emily's character that I wanted to address. I made her promise to give you this recording if she ever treated you badly. She probably forgot about it or hoped you would never need it. But I knew. I knew she might need to hear these words someday. Play this at a moment when she needs to understand what she is losing. Love you, Thomas. I stared at the note for a long time. Thomas had seen something in Emily that I had missed or refused to see. He had known that our daughter might grow into someone who valued status over substance, appearances over authenticity. And he had left me this message as a weapon or maybe as a tool for redemption. I was not sure which. I did not listen to the recording immediately. Part of me was afraid of what Thomas might say. Afraid that hearing his voice after all these years would break something inside me that I had carefully held together. But I kept the device with me, tucked into my purse, waiting to see if I would actually need it. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Sunny but not too hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of roses from the garden. I drove to the Whitmore estate alone, following the directions Emily had emailed me. No offer to send a car. No suggestion that I stay at the house the night before like I assumed the bridal party had. Just an address and a time. The estate was breathtaking. A 3-story mansion with white columns and grounds that looked professionally maintained. There was a tent set up for the reception, elegant and enormous, with round tables dressed in ivory linens and centerpieces that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I felt small standing there in my navy dress that I had sewn myself. It was well made and flattering, but next to the designer gowns the other guests wore, it looked homemade because it was. I found my seat in the ceremony area. Second row. Not front row where the mother of the bride traditionally sits, but close enough that it would not be obvious to casual observers that I had been displaced. The front row was reserved for Daniel's parents, his siblings, his grandmother who sat like royalty surveying her domain. I sat behind them feeling invisible. The ceremony was beautiful. Emily looked stunning in her Vera Wang gown, her face glowing with happiness as she walked down the aisle. Daniel watched her with obvious adoration. They exchanged vows that they had written themselves, promising to support each other's dreams and build a life of purpose and passion. There was no mention of family or parents or the people who had raised them. The vows were about their future together with no acknowledgement of the past that had brought them there. After the ceremony during cocktail hour, I wandered through the gardens holding a glass of champagne I did not drink. I felt out of place among these people with their easy confidence and expensive jewelry. I tried to make conversation with a few guests, but the interactions felt forced. They asked what I did, and when I said I was a seamstress, I saw the interest drain from their eyes. How nice. How quaint. And then they would drift away to find someone more interesting. That is when I heard Emily's voice. She was standing near a fountain with Daniel's mother Catherine. They were partially hidden behind a hedge of roses, but their voices carried. I stepped closer, not meaning to eavesdrop but unable to stop myself. "She is nothing, Mom," Emily was saying. "Just a burden I have been carrying my whole life. Thank God I can finally move on and live my real life without her dragging me down." Catherine's response was approving. "I am glad you understand the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people. Your mother seems sweet, but she is not really our kind. Better to keep those relationships at a comfortable distance." Emily laughed, and the sound was casual, careless. "Oh, don't worry. Plan to. I already told Daniel we need to limit contact. Maybe holidays if we absolutely have to. But honestly, I am hoping she just fades into the background. It will be easier for everyone." I stood there frozen behind the roses. My daughter. My Emily, who I had raised alone, who I had sacrificed everything for, who I had loved with every fiber of my being. She wanted me to fade into the background. She saw me as a burden, as something to be managed and minimized and eventually erased from her new perfect life. The recording device in my purse suddenly felt heavy. Thomas had known. Somehow he had seen this possibility years ago when Emily was still young, and he had left me a way to respond. I did not confront Emily immediately. Instead, I went back to my table for the reception dinner and watched my daughter perform. She gave a speech thanking everyone for coming, praising Daniel's family for welcoming her, talking about her excitement for their future. She mentioned her father briefly. My dad would have loved this day. But she did not mention me at all. Not even in passing. During dinner I barely touched my food. I watched Emily work the room, laughing with Daniel's relatives, posing for photos with her new in-laws, playing the role of perfect bride perfectly. She glanced at my table once or twice but never came over. Never checked if I was enjoying myself or needed anything. I was just another guest. Less than that actually, because at least the other guests warranted her attention. The speeches started after dinner. Daniel's father gave a warm welcome to Emily. His sister shared funny stories about Daniel growing up. Emily's college roommate talked about their adventures at Princeton. Everyone laughed and applauded. It was all very charming and touching. Then Emily stood up to give her speech. She thanked the Whitmores for raising such an amazing son. She thanked her friends for their support. She talked about her career and how Daniel encouraged her ambitions. She mentioned her father again. I wish my dad could be here to see this. He always believed in me. And then nothing. No mention of me. No acknowledgement of the woman who had actually raised her after Thomas died. Who had worked 60-hour weeks to keep her in good schools. Who had gone without so she could have. That was when I stood up. My hands were shaking but my voice was steady. Emily, I said. May I say something? The room went quiet. Emily's smile froze on her face. Mom, this is not really the time for speeches from extended family. Extended family. She had just demoted me to extended family at her wedding. But I was already committed. I pulled out the recording device. Your father left me something before he died. He wanted you to hear it. Especially if you ever forgot what family means. Emily's face went pale. Mom, please. Not now. Not here. Press play. Thomas's voice filled the tent through the device's surprisingly powerful speaker. He must have anticipated that it would need to be heard by a crowd. Emily, if you are hearing this, it means I am gone and your mother needed you to remember something important. I am recording this because I see you changing. You are 15 now and I am sick. I know I am not going to recover. The doctors have been honest about that. And I have been watching you and I am worried about who you are becoming. The room was absolutely silent. Every eye was on me and the device and Emily, who looked like she wanted to disappear. Thomas's voice continued. You are brilliant, Emily. So smart and driven. But you are also starting to resent your mother for things that are not her fault. I see how you look at our house. How you compare us to your wealthy friends' families. How you seem embarrassed when your mom picks you up from school in our old car. And I need you to understand something before I die. Your mother is the strongest person I have ever known. I felt tears starting but I refused to wipe them away. I wanted to hear every word. I wanted Emily to hear them too. When I got sick, Thomas said we had a choice. We could spend our savings on aggressive experimental treatments that probably would not work, or we could save that money for your future. Your college fund. Your opportunities. Your mother wanted to try everything to save me but I said no. I told her that my life was already full. I had loved her. I had raised you. I had lived well. But you still had your whole life ahead of you and I wanted to make sure you had every chance to succeed. Emily's hand was over her mouth. Tears were streaming down her face. Around the tent, guests were shifting uncomfortably but no one moved to stop the recording. So we saved the money, Thomas continued. And your mother went to work. She started her sewing business because it was something she could do from home while taking care of me and you. She worked late into the night after putting me to bed, after helping you with homework, after making sure we both had everything we needed. She sacrificed sleep and comfort and her own dreams so you could have yours. And Emily, if you are hearing this recording, it means you have forgotten that. It means you have let the world convince you that her sacrifices make her less valuable instead of more. I looked at Emily. She was crying openly now. Daniel had his arm around her but she was not looking at him. She was staring at the recording device like it was accusing her. Your mother is not perfect, Thomas said. No one is. But she loved you with everything she had. She gave you everything I would have given you if I had lived. And if you have grown into someone who sees that love as a burden instead of a gift, then I failed you as a father. Because I should have taught you that character matters more than status. That loyalty matters more than appearances. That the person who loves you unconditionally is worth more than all the social connections and wealthy friends in the world. The recording paused for a moment. When Thomas spoke again, his voice was softer, weaker. I am recording this a week before I die, Emily. I am in pain and I am tired and I am scared. Not of dying but of leaving you and your mother alone. I am scared you will forget what I taught you about kindness and gratitude and love. So I am leaving this message for your mother to play if she needs to remind you. And Emily, if you are hearing this, I want you to ask yourself one question. When you look in the mirror, do you see someone I would be proud of? Or do you see someone who has forgotten where she came from and who helped her get there? The recording ended. The silence in the tent was profound. I looked at Emily and saw my daughter breaking apart. Not the polished, successful bride she had been performing as all day, but the real Emily underneath. The one who knew she had betrayed everything her father had taught her. Everything he had hoped she would become. Catherine Whitmore stood up, clearly trying to salvage the situation. Well, that was certainly unexpected. Perhaps we should move on to the cake cutting. But Emily was not paying attention to her new mother-in-law. She was walking toward me through the tables and chairs, her face devastated. "Mom," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry." I stood there holding the recording device, wondering what to say. Part of me wanted to accept her apology immediately, to fold her into my arms and tell her everything was forgiven. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt and dismissed and erased, needed her to understand the depth of what she had done. "You called me nothing," I said quietly. "You told Catherine I was a burden. That you wanted me to fade into the background. Emily, I gave you everything. And you repaid me by being ashamed of who I am." "I know," Emily sobbed. "I know, and I hate myself for it. I got so caught up in trying to fit into this world. Into being the person I thought I needed to be. And I forgot who I actually was. I forgot that you made me into someone worth knowing." The guests were watching this private moment unfold in front of 200 people. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked moved. Catherine looked furious that her perfect wedding had been derailed by family drama. But I did not care about any of them. I only cared about my daughter and whether there was anything left to salvage between us. "Your father loved you so much," I said. "He sacrificed his life so you could have opportunities. And I sacrificed my comfort and my dreams so you could take those opportunities and build something meaningful. We did that because we loved you, Emily. Not because we wanted gratitude or recognition. But we did expect that you would remember where you came from. That you would honor the people who helped you become successful." "I do remember," Emily said. "Do. I just let other people's opinions matter more than the truth. Catherine and Daniel's family, they made comments about you. About your work and your background. And instead of defending you, I agreed with them. I told myself it was easier to go along than to make waves. But Mom, I was wrong. I was so wrong." Catherine interrupted then, her voice sharp. "Emily, perhaps we should have this conversation privately. There is no need to air family issues in front of our guests." I turned to Catherine, and for the first time all day I let her see my anger. "You told my daughter I was not your kind of people. You encouraged her to distance herself from me. You looked at a woman who raised a child alone and built a business from nothing and decided I was beneath you because I do not have old money and social connections. So no, Catherine. We are going to have this conversation right here in front of everyone. Because these people need to understand what your definition of class actually means." Catherine flushed red but said nothing. Daniel stepped forward then, looking between his mother and Emily and me. "Mrs. Stone," he said, "I did not know my mother said those things to Emily. And I certainly did not know that Emily was planning to limit contact with you. I was raised to believe that family is important, that the people who love you deserve respect and attention. If I had known Emily felt pressured to distance herself from you because of my family's attitudes, I would have intervened." Emily looked at Daniel with surprise and something like hope. "You would have." "Course I would have," Daniel said. Your mother seems like an amazing woman. She raised you alone. She supported your dreams. She made sacrifices so you could succeed. That is not something to be ashamed of, Emily. That is something to celebrate. I studied Daniel carefully. He seemed sincere. But I had been fooled before by people who said the right things while thinking something entirely different. Still, his words meant something. They suggested that maybe not everyone in this wealthy family shared Catherine's narrow worldview. Emily turned back to me. Mom, I want to make this right. I know I cannot take back what I said or undo the hurt. But please tell me there is a way forward. Tell me you do not hate me. I do not hate you, Emily. I could never hate you. But I am deeply hurt. And I need to know that this is not just about you feeling embarrassed in front of your wedding guests. I need to know that you actually understand what you did wrong. I do understand, Emily said. I understand that I let fear and insecurity turn me into someone Dad would be ashamed of. Someone who values appearances more than substance. Who treats the people who love her like inconveniences. Mom, I have spent the last year planning this wedding and trying to become someone the Whitmores would approve of. And in the process I lost sight of the person Dad raised me to be. She was sobbing now, her carefully applied makeup running down her face. Her perfect bride image was destroyed, but somehow she looked more real than she had all day. I became someone who saw her own mother as a liability. And I am so ashamed. I'm so sorry. Please tell me how to fix this. I looked at my daughter and saw the little girl who used to crawl into my lap when she was scared. Who used to help me pin fabric for alterations. Who used to tell me she wanted to be just like me when she grew up. That girl was still there underneath the ambition and the social climbing. She just needed to be reminded of who she actually was. You fix this by remembering Emily. You remember that your value does not come from your husband's bank account or your position in society. Comes from your character. From how you treat people. From whether you honor the people who sacrificed for you. And you fix this by making sure that when you have children of your own, you teach them that kindness matters more than status. Emily nodded, unable to speak through her tears. I put the recording device back in my purse and opened my arms. She fell into them like she was drowning, and I was the only thing keeping her afloat. We stood there in the middle of her wedding reception holding each other while 200 guests watched. Some were crying. Others looked uncomfortable. But I did not care. This moment was not for them. It was for me and my daughter and the memory of a man who loved us both enough to leave a message that would bring us back together. After a long moment, Emily pulled back and wiped her face. She looked at the guests, at Daniel, at Catherine, who was still standing stiffly near her table. I need to say something, Emily announced. To everyone. She walked to the microphone that had been set up for speeches. Her face was blotchy and her dress was wrinkled from our embrace, but she looked determined. I need to apologize, she began. Not just to my mother but to all of you. You came here today to celebrate love and commitment, and what you saw instead was me being confronted with my own cruelty. My own cowardice. And I am grateful for that. The tent was absolutely silent. My mother is the strongest person I know, Emily continued. She raised me alone after my father died. She worked impossible hours to give me opportunities one took for granted. She supported my dreams even when those dreams left no room for her. And I repaid her by being ashamed of who she is. By seeing her sacrifices as embarrassments instead of acts of love. I told myself that I needed to distance myself from her to fit in with this family and this social circle. But what I actually needed to do was remember who I am and where I came from. She looked directly at Catherine. Some people in my new family suggested that my mother was not our kind of people. That she should be kept at a distance. And I listened to those suggestions instead of defending the woman who gave me everything. That was wrong. And from this moment forward, anyone who wants to be part of my life needs to respect my mother and treat her with the dignity she deserves. If that is too much to ask, then they can leave now. No one moved. Catherine looked like she had been slapped, but she stayed seated. Daniel was smiling slightly, clearly proud of his new wife for standing up for herself and for me. The other guests seemed moved by Emily's honesty, or at least entertained by the drama. Emily turned back to me. Mom, I cannot undo the hurt. But I can promise you that from this day forward you will always have a place in my life. Not as a burden or an obligation, but as the woman who made me who I am. And if I ever forget that again, you have my permission to play Dad's recording as many times as necessary." The tent erupted in applause. Not the polite golf clap that had followed earlier speeches, but genuine enthusiastic applause. People were standing. Some were crying. It was the kind of moment that transforms an event from a party into something meaningful. I walked to where Emily stood at the microphone. We embraced again, and this time when I pulled back I was smiling. "Your father would be proud of you," I said quietly. "Not because you are rich or successful or marrying into a wealthy family, but because you had the courage to admit you were wrong and choose differently." Emily smiled through her tears. "I hope I can become the kind of person he believed I could be. The kind of person you raised me to be." The reception continued after that, but the energy had shifted. Guests approached me throughout the evening to introduce themselves and tell me how moved they were by what had happened. Some shared their own stories of family estrangement and reconciliation. Others simply wanted to meet the woman who had raised such a brave daughter. I spent the rest of the evening actually enjoying myself, dancing with Daniel's uncle and laughing with Emily's college friends and feeling included rather than invisible. Catherine avoided me for most of the night, but eventually she approached as I was gathering my purse to leave. "Mrs. Stone," she said stiffly. "May I have a word?" "Course. What happened today was unfortunate. I hope you understand that I was only trying to protect my son and help Emily navigate her new position in society." I looked at Catherine and saw a woman who had spent her entire life worrying about appearances, about what people thought, about maintaining her family's social standing. And I felt something unexpected. Not anger but pity. "Catherine," I said gently, "I am 70 years old. I have lived long enough to understand that protecting your position and protecting your soul are sometimes different things. You can teach Emily how to navigate society and help her succeed in your world. But please do not teach her that where someone comes from matters more than who they are. Because that is not protection. That is poison." Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slightly. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps I have been too focused on maintaining appearances. I will try to do better." It was not a full apology, but it was more than I had expected. I thanked her and left the reception feeling lighter than I had in months. Emily walked me to my car, still in her wedding dress. "Mom," she said as I opened the driver door. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for playing Dad's recording. I needed to hear it. I needed to be reminded of what actually matters." I hugged her one more time. "Drive safely, Emily. And come visit me soon. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Because we have 17 years of distance to make up for, and I would like to know the woman my daughter has become." "I will," Emily promised. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. Always have. Always will." The drive home took 2 hours and I spent most of it thinking about Thomas. About how he had seen the possibility of this moment all those years ago and given me the tool I needed to reach our daughter. He had loved us both so much that even in dying he found a way to protect us from the worst parts of ourselves. That was the kind of love that lasted beyond death. That shaped lives even when the person was gone. When I arrived home I took the recording device and placed it on my nightstand. I would keep it there as a reminder. Not of Emily's failure but of her courage in choosing to be better. Because that is what redemption is. Not the absence of mistakes but the willingness to acknowledge them and change course. 3 weeks after the wedding, Emily came to visit. She arrived on a Saturday morning with pastries from a local bakery and flowers from her garden. We spent the day talking. Really talking. Not the superficial conversations we had been having for years but deep, honest discussions about everything we had both been feeling. I told her about the loneliness of the years after Thomas died. How I had thrown myself into work partly to support us but also to avoid feeling the emptiness of his absence. How I had lived for her visits home from college and later from the city, even when those visits became increasingly rare and uncomfortable. Emily told me about the pressure she felt to succeed. How she had internalized the idea that her father's death meant she had to excel to justify the sacrifice. How that pressure had twisted into a need to distance herself from anything that reminded her of loss or struggle or imperfection. How Catherine and the Whitmore family had amplified those feelings by making her feel like her background was something to overcome rather than something to honor. We cried together. We laughed together. We started rebuilding what had been broken. Over the following months, Emily made good on her promise. She visited regularly. She invited me to events and actually introduced me to people instead of hiding me away. She started asking my advice about decisions she was making. Not because she had to, but because she genuinely valued my perspective. Daniel turned out to be a wonderful partner for her. He encouraged her relationship with me and made efforts to get to know me as a person rather than just his wife's mother. We had dinner together often, sometimes at their home, sometimes at restaurants, sometimes at my small house that Emily had once been embarrassed by. Catherine took longer to come around, but eventually even she softened. She never became warm exactly, but she treated me with respect and included me in family gatherings. I think seeing Emily and Daniel's happiness made her realize that my presence in their lives was not a threat but a gift. A year after the wedding, Emily called me with news. She was pregnant. I cried when she told me. Not just because I was going to be a grandmother, but because of what she said next. "Mom, I want to ask you something. When the baby is born, will you teach me how to be the kind of parent you and Dad were? The kind who puts their child first. Who makes sacrifices without resentment. Who raises someone with character and kindness and love." "Of course I will," I told her. "But Emily, you already know how. You learned it by watching how we raised you. You just forgot for a while. But you remembered when it mattered. And that is what you will teach your child. Not to be perfect, but to have the courage to make things right when you mess up." The baby was born 9 months later. A girl they named Grace Margaret. Grace for the second chance Emily felt she had been given. Margaret for me. When Emily placed that tiny baby in my arms, I saw the future. I saw a grandmother teaching her granddaughter to sew. Teaching her that work done with love has value beyond money. Teaching her that family is not about status or appearances but about showing up and staying present and loving unconditionally. I also saw Emily becoming the mother she was meant to be. Learning from her mistakes. Teaching her daughter by example that character matters. That kindness matters. That the people who love you deserve your respect and attention no matter what the world says about their position in society. Thomas would have loved this, I thought as I rocked Grace. He would have been proud of Emily for finding her way back. Proud of me for fighting for our relationship. Proud that his final message had accomplished exactly what he hoped it would. Not destroying our daughter but saving her from the worst version of herself. Sometimes I think about that moment at the wedding when I stood up and played the recording. How my hands shook. How afraid I was that it would push Emily away forever instead of bringing her back. But Thomas had known what he was doing. He understood that sometimes love means confronting the people we care about with hard truths. That real redemption requires accountability. Emily's transformation was not instant. There were moments over the following years when old patterns emerged. When she got too focused on appearances or status. When she forgot to call or visit because she was busy with work or social obligations. But we had built something stronger than before. A relationship based on honesty rather than obligation. And so when those moments happened, we talked about them. We worked through them. We chose each other over and over again. Now as I sit in my living room with Grace playing at my feet and Emily beside me planning a family dinner, I think about legacy. Not the kind that comes with money or social position, but the kind that lives in how you treat people. In whether you pass down love and character and courage to the next generation. Thomas gave me that recording because he knew I would need it. Because he trusted me to use it wisely. And in doing so he gave Emily something too. The chance to become someone better than she was. The chance to live a life that honored his memory and his sacrifices. That is the story of how I revealed a truth at my daughter's wedding. How I used my late husband's words to reach our child when she had lost her way. How we rebuilt what was broken and created something stronger. It is not a story with a simple ending because life does not work that way. But it is a story of hope. Of redemption. of love that survives death and distance and all the ways we hurt each other. And when Grace is old enough to understand, I will tell her this story. I will explain that her mother once lost her way but found it again. That her grandfather loved them both so much he left a message to guide them. That family is complicated and messy and sometimes painful but always worth fighting for. Because that is the truth Thomas wanted Emily to remember. That is the truth I fought to preserve. And that is the truth I will pass down to the next generation. Love requires work. Character requires courage. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the truth they need to hear even when it hurts to tell it. That is what I did at my daughter's wedding. I told a truth. And in doing so, I saved us both.